Chairs out if you wanted to. Doesn't need to be like a church pew. I think Gary chose this place specifically so it didn't look like a church pew.
There's my bride. Can I sit with you?
I don't know. Let's see if we can find a spot together.
Dave, are you still inside in the air conditioning? That's okay if you are. Ah, there he is.
Did we get Connie up here?
Yeah, she's inside.
She's gonna stay up there? I just told her.
All right, everybody. Welcome. Ready to go, Allie?
I think we're ready.
All right. Welcome. Welcome on behalf of Allie. Welcome on behalf of the Lambert family. Welcome to the memorial for our friend, Gary Lambert. I'm Henry Niedermeyer. I'm one of Gary's friends. My father used to say, acquaintances are many and friends are few. Well, Gary, I think, was an exception to that. He had many friends, as can be evidenced by the number of people that turned up today, huh? So, I knew Gary first as a father, then as a coach. As his daughter and my daughter got to be friends, he and I got to be friends. Today, we'll remember a man of honor, a good man. I think the way that people live forever is by us remembering them. I did it with my own father just a moment ago. The memory triggers are really the triggers to immortality. A turn of a phrase, a song, a tune, a shirt, a pair of shoes, a wine, a picture, even a smell. We all hold a special memory about Gary. He was a special man. I look forward to hearing about some of those memories today, and there'll be a time in the program when you'll get an opportunity. There's a lot of speakers here. My remarks are brief. I woke up this morning a little bit sullen, knowing that this event was in the offing. And then Gary's memory set me straight. Gary would certainly not have wanted this to be a sullen event. We're here to celebrate his life. He chose a place, a venue, his club, where he plays games, where he laughs, where he drinks, where he eats, where he spends time with his friends. I think he'd want us to do the same. So please, let's enjoy our time here together as we honor and celebrate our friend Gary Lambert. Blair.
Thanks, Henry. I can see it's already going to be a tough group to follow here. Can't believe we're all here today. Didn't think I'd be doing this summer. But let me thank you all for being here to celebrate Gary. I'm Blair, the youngest of the three boys, as we were called, Gary, Craig, and Blair. Over the next few minutes, I'd like to tell you a few things about Gary's life, share a few thoughts about our childhood, share a story or two about a hike that Gary and I took together. In short, I'd like to tell you a brief history of Gary, my brother, the historian. Gary was 70 years old when he passed away last month. He was a fourth generation Californian. I never thought about that before, but he pointed out when he wrote his own obituary. What can I say? He was a planner. Little known fact, our great-grandfather William Lambert and his wife Anna emigrated from England to New Zealand in about 1880. And in 1887, shortly after the birth of their first two sons, William and Archibald, they moved to San Francisco. Archibald, or Archie, was our grandfather and married our grandmother Cora in the early 1900s. Our father was born in 1907 in San Francisco, where he grew up. After our dad's first wife passed, he met and married our mother, Kind, in 1951. She's sitting right back there inside the window there. They settled in Menlo Park, which was a brand new post-World War II bedroom community, and about a year later, they had their first child, Gary, in May of 1952. Joellen used to always say that we were like the Leave It to Beaver family. We rode bikes. It was kind of true, because we rode bikes to get anywhere we wanted to get. We played with friends in the neighborhood. Some of them are here. And we had to be back for dinner by 5 o'clock. And if we messed up around town, by the time we got home, someone had called Mom and let her know what had happened, and you'd be paying for it. Most of you all know Gary's history. He was a history major from UC Davis and wanted to teach history when he graduated college. After traveling to Europe post-graduation in 1975, he quickly realized that the baby boom generation was finishing school. Schools were being closed, and coming by a job in teaching was getting more and more difficult. As a result, he ended up starting a career at Bank of America. He had a variety of positions at the bank for something like 30 years. But the biggest gift he got from the bank was that they sponsored his MBA at Golden Gate University, because that's where he met Joellen. I have to look at you, it's gonna be really hard. I don't know of any couple that were more like-minded than Gary and Joellen. They both loved to travel, they loved to ski, they both ran marathons at some point in their life. And they did a lot of backpacking together. They also both loved their daughter, Allie. Now I am gonna look at you. You know, Allie, I can still remember when Gary told Craig and I about your impending arrival. We were it was the first trip after Sophie had been born. And we were all up at Tahoe to do some skiing and play some poker. Over dinner, he asked how I was enjoying being a dad. And then he slipped in, "Do you think I'm gonna enjoy it?" He was so happy. And Gary and Joellen couldn't wait to share their love of travel and skiing and being with friends with you. Over the past few years, it's been such a joy for him to be able to spend time with you and see how you had taken on all of that mantle of what they loved. He was able to spend time with you at Lake Tahoe skiing. He was able to go to Puerto Rico to escape COVID and go to Mexico City for Thanksgiving. And he always spoke about how much he enjoyed the time that he spent with you and your friends. Turning back to Gary's work life, in 2006, he was working with a mortgage insurance company called PMI. And he definitely saw the writing on the wall of a looming disaster in the mortgage industry. Ever the historian, he saw the inevitable bust coming in the constant boom and bust economic cycles throughout history. I recall him telling me it was coming. I don't know that he knew how bad it was going to be, but he certainly knew something bad was going to happen. At that time, he was a credit analyst for PMI, and he kept arguing for the company not to take on the risk of insuring high-risk loan portfolios, but the company did it anyway, which prompted him to return to his original goal of teaching. In his early 50s, he got his teaching credential and began teaching AP World History, among other history classes in the East Bay. He loved teaching. He called it the hardest job he'd ever done, but it was more gratifying than any business job that he'd ever had. And it turns out he was pretty good at it. His pass rates in AP classes were terrific. He loved what he was doing. And I think one of the favorite parts of teaching for him was that in the summer, after kids had graduated, he could arrange a trip to Europe where he'd take some of the AP students over to Europe and do a tour with them. And the best part, he got to take Joellen along as a chaperone. And other friends. I think Bonnie went along. They did these trips, and he loved them because he got to know the kids more completely, more fully, and really enrich their lives and his together. So Gary was a historian of big things that had happened in the world. Civilizations that had failed, battles that had been fought, kingdoms that had crumbled. But family histories are a little more detailed and personal, particularly when the boys were left at home with Gary in charge. Like many kids growing up in the 60s, 6 p.m. on Saturday night was reserved for the wide world of sports. For those of you who are younger and don't know, the wide world of sports was the closest thing we had to ESPN. If you lived it, you forever recall the voice of Jim McKay talking about the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. On one particular Saturday night, we lived out that tagline. Mom and Dad were out for the night, and Gary was in charge. We just finished watching ski jumping, one of our favorites on the wide world of sports. Since Lawrence Welk was coming up next, we had no interest in that. Gary decided that we should have our own ski jumping competition right there at home. Lacking a ski jump, we had to improvise. So we each put on a new pair of socks. The rules were simple. You had to start in the bedroom by Mom and Dad's bed, get up to speed running down the carpeted hallway in their room, and launch before the carpet reached the linoleum in the family room. The first few times, we made it to the fireplace. But then Gary landed one, all the way to the dining table. But the winner was Craig. He made it to the fireplace, to the dining room table, and about halfway through the door that led out to the backyard. So, unfortunately, that door had about a 2 foot by 3 foot window at the top of it, and it broke into about 1,000 pieces. But amazingly, Craig was bruised and not cut. So we spent the next half hour laughing and retelling the story of the epic jump that Craig had made. And by the time we got done with that, it was getting late, so we had to clean up all of the glass, and Gary was sending us off to bed. But before leaving the room, he taped a note on the broken door for Mom and Dad. And it simply read, "Nobody got hurt." I'm not sure what happened the next day, but I'm pretty sure that it was worse for Gary than it was for Craig or I. Okay, so nights with Gary in charge were fun. But the most endearing memory for us growing up was our annual trips to Meeks Bay, Lake Tahoe, for the last 2 weeks of August. We did it for many years. Meeks Bay had great rustic cabins, beautiful beaches, a marina, kayaks for rent, pinball machines, oh my gosh, pinball machines, and weekly dance parties with music flowing from a jukebox. We'd water ski, hike, fish, play on the beach, swim, and just generally have a great time. Being in Meeks Bay also gave Gary some of his first experience with hiking in parts of the Sierra, because the Desolation Wilderness could be accessed from a trailhead directly behind Meeks Bay. So I think his early love of hiking was built upon day hikes to Lake Genevieve, just a few miles up the trail toward the mountain from Meeks Bay. So that leads me to another story. In 2016, I got the harebrained idea that I was going to do the John Muir Trail, hike the John Muir Trail, a 220-mile hike from Yosemite Valley to Mount Whitney. I was lucky enough to find folks willing to join me. Sophie joined me for the first 2 or 3 days. A friend of mine joined me for 4 days. I had a day or two on my own, which I will never do again. And then Perry came in for a couple days with friends, but the lion's share of it was done by Gary. He joined me for over half of it, a little bit over 110, 120 miles, and for most of the more significant passes that had to be taken on. We had a great time, and in all honesty, I was surprised at how well we got along. It was a great chance for us to reconnect as brothers. I can still remember, though, the first time we saw each other on the trail. When you're hiking like this and you're trying to meet somebody, you're always worried about, is the connection gonna work? Are you gonna be at the same place? But here I come up to Paiute Pass in the JMT, and here's Gary sitting on a giant stump, reading a book that had to have 1,000 pages. And all I could think is, oh my gosh, that thing must weigh 2 pounds. And I made some comment to him, and he just kind of shrugged it off. He'd already set up camp, so we got cleaned up, had dinner, and then as I was boiling some water, his plan became a little clearer. He said, when you're done with the water, leave the flame on. As I did, he walked over, ripped out the first 250 pages of the book, and burned it, just right there. And then he just looked at me and he said, you didn't think I was going to carry this? So my other great memory of that trip was from the last day. For background, the last day is long. It's about a 15-mile hike with a 3,000 feet of climbing and 6,500 feet of descent. It started early, around 4:30 a.m. We broke camp and headed up to the junction with Mount Whitney Trail that heads to the peak. When the main trail meets the Mount Whitney Trail, you have a choice to continue to Whitney Portal, which is where our trip would end, or do a 3-mile out and back hike to the peak. Gary told me he was not going to go to the top of Mount Whitney. He'd been there before, so he was just going to head straight down to the end of the trail. At first I was surprised, because he put in all the effort to get there. But what I later learned was that he just wanted me to reach the peak on my own and have a chance to have some time to reflect about the trip on my way down. I think that story says a lot about Gary. He makes decisions that he thought were best for others, not looking for praise, but just to be a supportive friend. And I suspect that he's given that gift of being a supportive friend to many of you. So that's a few snippets of history with Gary. Someone I admire once told me, the good thing is that history is completed and finished, but history books are never closed. Just like that, Gary's life will never be over. It just lives on in the rest of us who carry his spirit.
Hi everybody, my name is Mark, and good afternoon. Allie asked me to reread a last minute letter that Gary had written for an event in late June, actually just right over here outside one evening, and he was unable to attend the dinner, but this is going to be the truncated version for those who may have already heard this before. So these are Gary's words. I've been doing justice. Thank you all for coming. I had envisioned this as a post-surgery event, but since there isn't really going to be any surgery, it seemed to be as good a time as any to do this. The year started out well enough.